What would happen if the Bismarck, the legendary battleship that once terrorized the Atlantic and remains Nazi Germany's most famous warship, suddenly found itself facing a modern destroyer in combat? This hypothetical scenario pits the apex of World War II naval engineering against contemporary naval technology, a fascinating thought experiment that reveals how dramatically naval warfare has evolved in the past 8 decades. Commissioned in August 1940, the Bismarck represented the pinnacle of German naval engineering and the ultimate expression of battleship design philosophy. At 251 meters long and displacing over 50,000 tons when fully loaded, she was a floating fortress designed to dominate any surface engagement. Her very existence altered British naval strategy, and her brief but dramatic career culminated in one of the most famous naval hunts in history. At first glance, the matchup might seem to favor the Bismarck. Modern destroyers, despite their sophisticated systems, appear almost fragile in comparison to the heavily armored behemoth. Today's warships are often derisively referred to as tin cans by naval historians, and there's some truth to this characterization. Where the Bismarck boasted armor plating up to 320 millimeters thick on her main belt, modern destroyers typically have no armor beyond basic splinter protection, perhaps 25 millimeters of steel at most, primarily designed to protect against small arms fire and shrapnel, rather than direct hits from major weapons. The Bismarck's defensive scheme was comprehensive and sophisticated. Her main armor belt could resist shells from any battleship of her era, while her deck armor, up to 120 millimeters thick in places, provided protection against plunging fire at long ranges. Her turrets were armored fortresses unto themselves, with faceplates 360 millimeters thick. Even her secondary systems were heavily protected, ensuring the ship could continue fighting even after sustaining significant damage. Furthermore, modern naval weapons systems aren't specifically designed to penetrate heavy armor. Contemporary anti-ship missiles typically employ high-explosive fragmentation warheads optimized for destroying the electronics, sensors, and light structures of modern warships. They rely on blast effect and fragmentation rather than pure penetrating power. Against the Bismarck's massive armor scheme, many of these weapons might struggle to inflict immediately catastrophic damage. The Bismarck's offensive capability was equally impressive. Her main battery consisted of 8 38-centimeter, 15-inch SK-C-34 guns mounted in 4 twin turrets. These massive weapons could hurl 800-kilogram armor-piercing shells at velocities exceeding 820 meters per second. At optimal range and angle, these projectiles could penetrate up to 742 millimeters of armor, enough to punch through any warship ever built, and certainly more than sufficient to obliterate a modern destroyer with a single hit. The destructive power of these weapons cannot be overstated. A single 38-centimeter shell striking a modern destroyer would likely result in catastrophic damage. The thin hull would offer no resistance, and the shell would likely pass completely through the ship before detonating, potentially breaking the destroyer's back or causing massive flooding that modern damage control systems would struggle to contain. However, this is where the Bismarck's advantages end and the harsh realities of technological advancement begin to tell. The fundamental problem facing the World War II battleship is one of range and detection. The Bismarck's main guns, despite their awesome power, had a maximum effective range of approximately 36 kilometers, 22 miles, under ideal conditions. In practice, accurate fire at such ranges was extremely difficult, requiring optimal weather conditions and skilled fire control. Let's examine a modern adversary, the United States Navy's Arleigh Burke class destroyer, one of the most common and capable surface combatants in today's naval forces. While displacing only about 9,000 tons, less than a fifth of the Bismarck's weight, these ships possess capabilities that would seem like magic to World War II naval officers. The Arleigh Burke's primary anti-ship weapon is the RGM-84 Harpoon missile. While relatively old by modern standards, having entered service in 1977, the Harpoon has a range of up to 124 kilometers, 77 miles, more than triple the Bismarck's maximum gun range. More modern anti-ship missiles in the destroyer's arsenal, such as the Naval Strike Missile, can reach out even further while maintaining excellent accuracy. The technological gap becomes even more apparent when examining sensor capabilities. The Bismarck's primary search radar, the FUMO-23, had a maximum detection range of approximately 25 kilometers, 13.5 miles, under optimal conditions. This primitive system could provide basic range and bearing information, but little else. In contrast, the Arleigh Burke's AN-SPY-1 radar can detect and track surface targets at ranges exceeding 160 kilometers, 100 miles, while simultaneously monitoring hundreds of air contacts. This massive disparity in detection and engagement range creates an insurmountable tactical problem for the Bismarck. In any realistic engagement scenario, the modern destroyer would detect the battleship long before entering the range of her guns. The destroyer could then launch multiple anti-ship missiles from well beyond the Bismarck's ability to respond, maintaining this standoff distance throughout the engagement. The Bismarck's fire control systems, while advanced for their time, would struggle against a modern destroyer's speed and maneuverability. Modern destroyers can sustain speeds over 30 knots and execute radical evasive maneuvers that would make them extremely difficult targets for unguided naval gunfire. The Bismarck would need to fire numerous salvos, hoping for a lucky hit, while constantly under missile attack. Even if we imagine a scenario where the Bismarck somehow closed to gun range, perhaps through adverse weather, limiting radar effectiveness, or some other unlikely circumstance, the battleship would still face significant challenges. Without modern sensors and fire control computers, achieving hits on a fast-moving, maneuvering destroyer would require exceptional gunnery and considerable luck. Meanwhile, even at close range, the destroyer could continue launching missiles and employing advanced electronic warfare systems to confuse and degrade the Bismarck's already limited sensors. The Bismarck's heavy armor, while providing protection against individual missile hits, wouldn't guarantee survival. Modern naval tactics emphasize overwhelming defenses through saturation attacks. A destroyer could launch multiple missiles in quick succession, targeting critical systems like radar antennas, gun directors, and the bridge. While these hits might not sink the battleship immediately, they would progressively degrade her combat capability. History provides a relevant lesson here. On May 27, 1941, a single torpedo from a swordfish biplane struck the Bismarck's stern, jamming her rudders and sealing her fate. This demonstrates how even the mightiest warship can be crippled by damage to critical systems. Modern precision-guided weapons would be far more capable of targeting such vulnerabilities than World War II-era torpedoes. Furthermore, modern destroyers possess capabilities that go beyond mere firepower. Advanced electronic warfare suites could jam the Bismarck's primitive radios and radars. Helicopter-launched torpedoes could attack from unexpected angles. Modern damage control systems and automated firefighting equipment would allow the destroyer to potentially survive hits that would cripple ships of the Bismarck's era. The fundamental truth is that battleships became obsolete for compelling reasons. They were enormous, maintenance-intensive vessels that required crews of thousands and cost fortunes to operate. But beyond these practical considerations, the evolution of weapons technology, particularly guided missiles and advanced sensors, rendered their entire combat paradigm obsolete. The age of gun duels between armored leviathans gave way to an era of long-range precision strikes and electronic warfare. In conclusion, while the Bismarck would certainly prove more resilient to sinking than modern warships, she would be effectively helpless against a modern destroyer's standoff capabilities, unable to detect her opponent until too late, unable to close to gun range, and unable to effectively defend against guided weapons. The mighty battleship would likely suffer a fate similar to her historical end, crippled by precision strikes against critical systems, then finished off at the enemy's leisure. The matchup dramatically illustrates how technological advancement has fundamentally transformed naval warfare, rendering even the mightiest ships of the past obsolete in the face of modern weapon systems.